guess my first question, you mentioned you went to the University of Iowa, but did you like grow up in Iowa City or where did you grow up?
I grew up in Fort Dodge, but I was all Hawkeye family. My dad went, my older sister went. I just knew I'd go there. I wanted, so yeah.
Yeah, majoring in psychology and economics, like when in your college experience did you decide that intersection? Because it seems pretty niche and cool.
Well, I added the psychology because I took a couple courses like psychology of adjustment, social psychology, and I was just fascinated. But I'm still fascinated how people behave, what motivates people, all those factors. And so that's why I did that for sure. But I got decent grades and I graduated. But I enjoyed myself.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm actually planning and majoring in psychology as well. Seriously.
Yeah, in those 3 or 4 decades since I went, it's come a long way. Like behavioral economics and some of the fascinating things they study and you can study. It's really it's a very good thing to know about and to major in and all that for sure.
Yeah, this is kind of putting you on the spot, but do you have like a coolest thing that you've learned, I guess, or like something, I don't know, really fascinating?
Back in college?
Yeah, I guess. Or just something you've learned with psychology, yes.
I would say it's more recent. Like I listened to, I don't know if you're familiar with like NPR radio, but there's a program on every week about the brain and the mind. And this guy, it's all about the psychology of human beings. And it's a fascinating thing. I try and tune in every week, and I usually learn something every week. So, life is lifelong.
Yeah. Ooh, I should do that. We are an NPR family too, but I feel like I only listen to the morning edition and then like the daily, because it's like when we're eating breakfast and then when we're cooking dinner. Yeah, growing up in Fort Dodge, what was that like? What did you do when you were little or when you were in high school?
Well, it was thriving when I was there, through the 60s and into the 70s. And town about 25,000. It was like just classic Midwest, small town. Good education, you didn't have to lock the doors, that sort of thing. I enjoyed it. Made lifelong friends. I played sports. I did start playing the piano when I was in second grade, but I did not like it. My mom wanted me to do it. So I did it for a couple of years. And finally she said, okay, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. So.
Yeah, I was kind of the same way, but now I regret that. What sports did you play?
Baseball and basketball, and then on other, we played pickup football, but my best sport was baseball. I played that through high school, and I got better at basketball, but I kind of matured late. I was a gangly, skinny guy, so but I enjoyed. We played pickup, and get some kids in the neighborhood, friends growing up. So yeah, it was very.
Yeah, I feel like the draft, I've learned about all of it from a very historical point of view, but you said that you would get drafted when you're 18, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the year that your number would be called. So was that like an anxiety factor, I guess, in high school? Like, were people nervous about it?
Very much so. I mean, we had other people that got drafted, but I knew people, not close, but there were people that went to my high school that got drafted in the mid-'60s and got killed over in Vietnam. And and I had one of my best friends, his older brother had just graduated from college. So he like starved himself. So he'd flunk his physical. There were people that were doing all kinds of things to avoid going to Vietnam. And so it was not a good time in terms of that. I mean, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do you see any, I guess, parallels between, I don't know, maybe growing up in that environment and like coming of age and like COVID?
there's nothing like what's happened here with COVID. But what has happened between the COVID and then all the Black Lives Matter and what went on last summer and is continuing to move on, I was definitely coming of age with all the different protest movements, civil rights in the 60s, Vietnam, gay rights a little bit. It didn't really get going, and women's rights, all those things were happening. And I thought, wow, it's going to keep getting better. And then all of a sudden, like the 80s hit, and we became the me generation, and it got more and more conservative. But things are sort of like people are waking up. That's what COVID-19 does to you. So
I don't know, were you an activist in your young years? Do you have any?
A little bit. I wasn't really a frontline type person, but I definitely supported it. And like I said, by the time I went to Iowa, it quieted down because they knew the draft was over. Things were winding down, and then they finally in '75 it was all over. A bunch of gains in civil rights and again women's liberation, all that, and people were very hopeful because we had come out of the 50s and early 60s and some of that stuff that was going on. So it had really started to quiet down a bit when I entered school.
Yeah. People have been, I guess I've heard some comparisons between like the civil rights movement and I guess the Black Lives Matter movement now. I don't know, do you think there's parallels, and do you have hope for, I guess, this time it'll work?
Well, there's similar things. Actually, it kind of had just people had fallen asleep. And then with social media, and then all of a sudden you're seeing all this stuff, and it was always going on. I didn't realize it. And then and personally, you may not be a racist, but there is a huge amount of institutional racism. As human beings, we do have implicit and kind of unconscious bias. And people are waking up to that, which is good. But yeah, we need change for sure in a lot of things. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm not going to live long enough. You guys are much younger, hopefully. Good change is going to come out of the COVID-19 pandemic and some of this other stuff going on. But,
yeah. How, I guess, has COVID, in what ways has it personally, I guess, affected you? It affects everyone, obviously, but
yeah, well, for me personally, it didn't affect me that much because one, I'm older. I don't go to bars and that sort of thing at all. I was working at Lowe's at the time, so as an essential worker, essential business, I still was able to get out and make a little money, and we were real busy because people couldn't do anything, so we were like busy. That was good. But again, because I'm kind of a solitary person anyway, and I'm fine without a whole lot of social interaction. So it didn't affect me that like a lot of people, because especially younger people, I know it was very hard. And then depending on how social you are and all that, but I've pretty much gotten along okay with it. Although I'm ready for things to open up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good to hear. I'm hoping the vaccine by May. My fingers are crossed now that he said that.
Good news yesterday. It sounds like it's going to be available. So
yeah,
we'll see. But yeah.
This is a question I think Julie asked at our first meeting with GenStories, but I thought it was a really good idea, and I've incorporated it into all my interviews. What's something you look forward to doing every day?
Now the weather's better. I really like to bicycle. And actually I'm open to riding ragbrai this summer. So now the weather's better. I'll be able to get out and start training for that, get in good shape. That's one thing. What else? I read a lot. I'm into sports like music, pretty much all kind of typical things that people enjoy. I'm really into Hawkeye sports too. And it's been really good for football, wrestling, basketball, all the sports. And that's been a good thing. At least they've been able to compete. And kudos to UI and their sports departments. They have had minimal COVID-19 issues, which is incredible. But we'll see. You just never know with that. And they're opening stuff up, so hopefully we won't have another one.
Yeah. Have you done ragbrai before?
No. But I've got a childhood friend or a neighbor that's done it like 6 or 7 times, and he's going to ride with me. But I just moved back to Iowa a few years ago, and never even thought about riding it back when it started in the 70s. And then I moved away in the early 80s. But I've got, I know several other people that have ridden. Everybody says it's just like the best. Actually, I got motivated because Charlie, I was working with at Lowe's, who's even older than I rode it 2 years ago. I said, well, Charlie, if you can ride it, and he had so much fun with it, I'm going to go for it. So, yeah.
That's great. You mentioned you just moved back to Iowa. Was that from North Carolina?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I lived in Chapel Hill. I went to school there, and then I lived in Durham for almost 3 decades before I moved back. But I got several brothers here, and they're significant others, and several really good friends here in Coralville and Iowa City, and that's why I moved back here. And I'm really glad I did. It was a good move, and I still have really good friends back in North Carolina, but I don't have any. I mean, I've never been married, and I don't have kids, so that wasn't an issue. I got more family back here, obviously. So
yeah. What's Durham like? I've never really been.
I enjoyed living there. Again, it was somewhat of a culture shock a little bit, but Chapel Hill, I don't know if you're familiar, Chapel Hill, Durham, and Raleigh are what they call the Triangle. So there's a lot of Midwestern, Northeastern folks that have moved there, and it's not like the Deep South. So it's much more progressive there. But for instance, Durham is like 60% Black. But like I said, when I took that first job, I got to know folks. I was still playing basketball. I used to go and play pickup basketball games at the Y and on the courts, and I'd be the only white guy. But it was fun. Really enjoyed it. So it's again, I have people that I met, good friends that were still. The schools had just desegregated really in the 70s. Took them that long. So it was kind of, all that was a wake-up call in terms of some of that. But
yeah. You mentioned like ragbrai being something that you hopefully want to do potentially this summer. Do you have any other, I guess, like fun bucket list type things that you've been looking forward to doing for a while?
No, I just, actually, I'm hoping to take up fishing again. I haven't, I used to fish a lot, but since I moved back to Iowa, I haven't. I just, I did a little ice fishing 3 years ago, but since then, other things got in the way. So the weather's getting better, so I may take that up again too. And yeah.
Was that something you did when you were like younger in Fort Dodge?
Yeah, when I was a kid growing up, we went fishing a lot. And then I kind of just, when I moved to North Carolina, I had a friend that lived out on the coast. So whenever I visited him, he had a boat. We'd go out fishing and shrimping and all that. But that was really, I didn't do any inland fishing in North Carolina. So.
Yeah. I feel like we touched very briefly on social media with like the activism and I don't know, you mentioned that like that's somehow like a way that people obviously like communicate and get things changed, but I guess how have you seen the world change from like not having any social media and like
just
early internet to just what it is now?
I don't know how we got along. We were able to socialize back in the day, how we communicated. It's like we didn't even have answering machines finally came in, but we had social lives. We figured out how to get up together and all that and communicate business wise. But there are so many good things with the technology. But again, between what's going on with Facebook and Google and data mining and tracking you, some of that's kind of scary, to tell you the truth. It is kind of scary. So I don't really do much social media. I'm on Google, but I'm not on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn, but that's more of a professional thing. And I don't use Twitter. And I know there's dozens of other social media apps that are out there, but I'm pretty much staying away. I'm not doing it, at least for now.
Yeah. I feel the same way. How did you did you just walk over to people's houses when you were younger and just see if they were available?
We did have telephones back there though. So we were able to use the telephone. But yeah, no, it's so much different now because nobody uses voicemail. Nobody leaves messages. You know who's calling you. Texting is wonderful. We all text. It's a good way to communicate. Email, not as much. Email started happening in the 90s and people used emails and then a little bit of direct messaging. But when the smartphone came out, the whole ballgame changed. Yeah, absolutely. But we are all addicted to it. That's for sure. Me too. I'm on it too much.
I feel the same way, especially with COVID. What else is, there's not much else to do, I guess. Did you have I know you majored in psych and economics, but when you were little, did you have a dream of what you were going to be? That was very clear.
Well, just like a lot of kids, I want to be a professional baseball player growing up, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. And then, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Everybody told me I should be a lawyer. And so I thought about law school. Actually, I went to planning school graduate, but actually I was in the joint planning and law program. And I had been accepted by several law schools. But once I got into planning and what was going on there, I just decided I really like this. Let me go do this. Maybe I'll come back to go to law school. But once I got out working, I decided I didn't want to become a lawyer. I don't think I would have been, well, there's a lot of different lawyering things you can do, but some of it, I wouldn't be cut out for sure.
Yeah. You mentioned you read a lot too. Do you have, I don't know, has that always been the case? Did you read a lot when you were younger too?
Oh yeah. I read all the time. I even got my picture in the paper when I was in third grade at the
For
school
reading?
library. Yeah, because myself and several other people, they picked us out because we were ferocious readers. So yeah, the libraries are great. Books are great. So. And actually, I don't probably read as much as I used to because of being able to go Google and surf the web. And it's so wonderful. I mean, if you have a question about something back in the day, you have to do research, go to the library, look it up. Now you can just pretty much at your fingertips find something immediately. Although you got to be careful. You got to vet it. You don't want to, you can't, well, is that true that everything's true on the internet? I don't think so.
No one ever knows. Yeah. Did you have a favorite book, I guess, you remember growing up or now?
The Count of Monte Cristo, I remember reading that in early high school. I love that book. Alexander Dumas. And I pretty much just read all the stuff that was assigned in schools. And over the years, I read a lot of nonfiction now, actually. But every once in a while, I'll read a novel. I like biographies. So
I've heard, I haven't read it yet, but our journalism advisor just recommended it to us. It's called Hidden Valley Road. And it's about, I guess, a family. I think it's 6 children who are all born with schizophrenia.
Really?
And a journalist went to live with them. So I don't know, maybe as a psychologist and a nonfiction lover, that could be a good book for you.
Now that you mention that too, back in the day, it was like if you were diagnosed schizophrenia, there was not like that levels of different types of all of the sort of the mental health things. And that is where we've really come a long ways with. Because back in the day, boy, if you were diagnosed with it, they didn't know how to deal with it. But if they know initially you may be moving toward that. There's lots of people that have very, almost normal, productive lives. For sure.
Yeah. What was studying psychology like, I guess? Obviously not in its like super early days, but yeah, now seeing how far it's come since you still like kind of stay in the loop.
Um, well, it was like I love school. I was one of those people that just enjoyed it, and I still do. I think you keep learning your whole life. So, okay, Marta, I asked this too last time out. Um, Definitely COVID related, but for instance, I mentioned earlier again how important music, dance, art is for us to have full and good lives. Have you turned to like more music or opened up with some of those sorts of things? And what kind of music you listen to these days? And tell me about how that may have helped you get through some of this pandemic and all that.
Yeah, I actually wrote like a personal essay and also just a lot of my college essays about sort of that because I don't know, in my mind, I guess periods of time are sort of sectioned out by like the music I've listened to a lot because I've always been a pretty avid music listener. So especially like, I don't know, when now with streaming services, when you used to have to like buy albums, it was like, I remember only listening to this album, for like 2 months, but now it gets a little more fuzzy. But definitely it's like an obscene amount. It's like 70 playlists or something like that during quarantine that are all like 5 hours long. So if that tells you anything about how I spend my time. But I don't know. I like I like the indie rock. I kind of listen to a little bit of everything. So it's funny. I have an app called Spotify, and it has a pretty like nice algorithm, I guess. But it never knows where to put me. So every single recommended playlist is like totally different. But yeah, I really like an album. Do you know Mort Garrison? He does Mother Earth's Plantasia. It was an album that was I think it came out in the 1970s.
No,
But
actually, I don't.
I don't know. That's one of my all-time favorites. Do you have any music recommendations? I always love a good.
I love all kinds. Back growing up, I was more into rock, obviously, but I've developed taste into jazz. I was listening to classical this morning. But yeah, I go back to Beatles and the band and CCR, some of that music definitely. But then through the years, reggae, ska, I was into the Clash. And then it's like, it is true though, what you listen to in your teens and 20s, you do kind of gravitate back to that. But I've picked up and listened to a lot of more contemporary music too, for sure. But it's completely different because now with streaming, I mean, between like YouTube channel and Spotify, I mean, you have access to a lot of music, which is kind of a bummer to some of the artists, but it also has opened up a whole bunch of avenues and places for musicians and really talented artists that would never have been heard without the internet and streaming. So
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm actually doing sort of an internship. It's moving a little slowly with COVID, but I went to a journalism conference this summer and I met a guy who runs this journalism collective called Raw Music International. And he does international reporting. It's mostly documentary based, but about like underground musicians in different countries. And I guess his message or theory is that like because music is such a universal thing, that's like a way that you can connect and introduce cultures through just like strictly like one artist, which I think is really cool. So the current project, which has been moving pretty slow with COVID, is like there's this record of gospel music that was kind of like stolen, essentially. Like what you're saying, I don't know, even with streaming services, artists are taking advantage of. But I'm learning through this that a lot of, especially like minority artists, were very much taken advantage of, like with records and stuff like that. So they took a lot of recordings from like churches and stuff like that and just like made them into this gospel record. and didn't credit anybody involved. So our goal right now is to like contact either the musician themselves if they're still alive or the families of them and kind of do like an oral history and then create like a new record that has like a combination of like, here's like who actually made this music and now it will profit them, you know, and you can learn about their history too.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, that I listened to it was an NPR piece the other day. They interviewed this gentleman that had gone back and they were back in the early like 1920s, 30s. There were some companies that were going out and sending people out to make recordings of all these different cultures or people. And I forget the name of his project. It's just come out, but it was really interesting because he was finding some of these early recordings, and of course they're, you know, production-wise, they're 1920s circa, but he was able to locate the backstory of some of these folks and all that. It was really, really interesting. And I wish I could remember who it was, but if you go to NPR and you do a little research, you'll find it. It was just like in the last week or two on one of their programs. So let me ask you this. Whoops. I got a really bad rig set up here. Did you, or tell me about your school experience now, like how COVID-19 is affecting you there and what's going on and how's it going for you and the adjustments that you've had to make?
Kind of like you said, I think I've always really liked school. I've been lucky in that regard. But yeah, I have been all online the whole time. So I think that's been a little hard, especially recently. I don't know, just the winter, because it used to be, I am one of the more social people, but I also am a more anxious person and just like never wanted to bring it back to my family. Now my parents are vaccinated, but because they work in healthcare, which is really great. But now they're like, well, we don't want you to get it either.
Sure.
So it has been, I don't know, the hardest part I think is maybe seeing people, because I think most people are being, I guess, a little less cautious than I am, which that's totally, I don't know, personal preference. I feel like as long as you're not being super unsafe, but it is kind of hard to see like your friends hanging out with masks inside, but like you're like, I can Zoom you. It's, I don't know, it's a little sad, but I think school-wise, it's okay. Our teachers are doing a really, really good job trying to adjust. I know it can't be easy, so I'm really thankful for that. So,
and you'd be graduating this year, next year?
Yeah, this is my graduation year.
Oh, wow. So you're still all online then for the most part, or are you doing the okay? And I forget I don't have anybody close to me that's part of the high school or the regular school system, but it's so confusing because I know, despite our wonderful Governor Reynolds, I think everybody's going in person, right? I mean, they're trying to like fire the Des Moines area superintendent because, and same thing with Iowa City. But you tell me more about that. What you've heard. What you're thinking about that?
Yeah, so she I actually was planning on going in person for third trimester because we've had a pretty nifty since the start of this year. So when COVID started last year, it was optional classes from like April to, which is so funny to think about. Like the Zooms were like 4 people and nobody was paying attention. Like kids, I don't know, it was kind of crazy. It was pretty disorganized, which I don't know, for someone who's in a position like me, who I'm lucky to have like, I don't know, like educated parents and like enjoy school, I think it was okay. But I do worry about like the kids who I guess don't have those privileges because getting left without that structure, I don't know, school for a lot of people is like a really important place that they need to be. So then at the start of this year, they developed a hybrid model. So I'm not entirely sure the logistics. I know it's like half of the people who choose hybrid are in the building for like 3 days and they do class, and then they do 2 days of like online asynchronous work, and then the next day they do 2 days and 3 days. So then they go alternating like A's and B days every single week, and that actually seemed to be working pretty well. It seemed to be safe, and yeah, it seemed like they were getting through it. So I was thinking third trimester, some people will be vaccinated, warmer weather, I can go back. And then Miss Kim Reynolds, her proclamation was, if you're like, there's no more hybrid. So in-person people need to be 100% in person. And then it used to be that if a school, like when our positivity rates went crazy high, I think towards Thanksgiving, we went all online. So the people who were in hybrid went online too. But she made it so you can't do that anymore. So if it's, you go all online, it's just the people who are in person would go back to every other day. So she really, I don't know, I think she kind of derailed a lot of people's plans, because I know a few other people who are like me who are really excited to go back third trimester, which that's the least of our worries. But yeah, class sizes are at or above pre-COVID capacity now. So there's like 30 people in classrooms.
So do you most of your friends enjoy school, or do you know anybody that I mean, I always hear all the kids want to go back to school, but there's a lot of kids that probably don't. They don't like school. Tell me about that. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true. And I think that's funny to think about too. Like, it's all a matter of perspective, right? Like for some people this year's great. Like I do know some people, like, I think especially those, you have to be at that sweet spot, I feel like, of, I guess you feel invincible with COVID because you're young and somehow your parents don't care and you also don't care about school. I feel like to truly enjoy right now, there have to be a combination of factors, but I definitely know some people that this has been like the best year yet for them. I don't think I'm personally one of them, but yeah, no, for sure that makes sense. I'm lucky to have like school activities, so like journalism that I can do online. But without that, I think it would be a pretty boring year for me, I guess, at least.
so what's the biggest challenge that you faced over the past year now? It's been really a year, either school related or just generally, like with you and your friends or family. Anything that jumps out?
Yeah, I think just like it's been mentally tough, I guess. And yeah, just a little hard. I think a lot of highs and lows that everyone has, but just like you think about it and you're like, it's not that bad. Then you're like, oh, but this is, I guess just the comparison that it's supposed to be such a good time in your life, and then like the reality that I guess right now it isn't, is a little frustrating. But also, I don't know, I'm really grateful that I have like good friends who we still FaceTime or like go on walks, or you know, and I have a great family, so I'm really lucky in that regard. But yeah, it's definitely hard, and just I guess seeing the news all the time, because I do follow it pretty closely, it can just take a lot out of you to feel. I think we interviewed someone for a story last time that said something about how like it feels like you can go back on your news feed and there's like 2,000 bad things that have happened and you haven't like stopped any of them. So then you just kind of feel all the time like this, you know, pressure of like, wow, there's so much bad things happening right now. But yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much COVID-19, 24 hours on all the news, but with the vaccines coming out, hopefully, maybe by summer, we'll know.
Yeah.
So I'm going to switch the subject a little bit because there's some other really good questions that they prepped us with. And this is a really good one to ask. If you could have a superpower, what would it be and why?
Ooh. I'm going to say like hold my breath infinitely underwater. And I guess, can I add on like not be affected by water pressure? Because I think it'd be really cool to just be able to scuba dive free solo, I guess. I used to sail a lot when I was younger, because my family is from Spain, and that was like, there's this program where the high schoolers in the town that we lived in, honestly, probably in America, they'd get sued for all the stuff they do. Like, it's not like a safe program, but it's just what kids do. So when you're a kid, you go to this program and you're kind of like harassed by the teenagers who are not responsible and are like smoking on the boats. And like for me to teach me how to swim and like not be scared of the water, they just threw me out of the boat and were like, swim back to shore. And I think there it would have been very helpful to just be able to breathe underwater. I don't know. I've always thought the ocean was really cool, but sometimes it can be a little scary. So it'd be cool to
Yeah, that's a very unique and original superpower that one might have. But you're right. They with all the deep sea stuff they're doing now, with again the technologies, they're discovering all this stuff deep underneath the sea, and up underneath the both the Arctic, the North and South poles. It's amazing. And let's see. So how have you been able to interact and halfway normally with friends during COVID? Do you guys Zoom a lot, or do you just talk on the phone and text? And every once in a while, I think you mentioned you take walks, get outside, you can interact a lot better outside. Obviously, it's safer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's been mostly like outdoor walks, and like, which I very much enjoy, or I like running. So I have a friend that we try to run, not as much anymore. We're doing pretty well, and then that like 3-week period where it's too cold to even like leave your house kind of derailed that a little bit. But yeah, we're pretty good with Zooming. I feel like I'm lucky with that. A lot of my friends graduated last year too. So now it's cool to, I don't know, we probably wouldn't be as close still as we were if it was a regular year. So I still get to talk to them a lot. And then with journalism, I get to, I don't know, it feels like I'm always on a meeting for our little publication staff because it's all online now. But I really love everyone on the staff. So I'm like, it's fun for me. It's kind of also social interaction time because just getting to talk to them is really fun.
Sure. So do you participate in any other sports or anything else that school related or outside of school?
Journalism is my main squeeze, but I run cross country pretty poorly. I've always been a pretty bad runner, but I enjoy it. What else did I do? Before COVID, I was involved in like clubs imaginable, I guess. And for a journalism project last year, I actually learned how to box for like 4 months with the local boxing gym, which was really cool. Except for I've always been pretty injury prone, and I broke my thumb in a car door, not with boxing, but so I had to wear like a thumb thimble, so I couldn't punch with my right hand. So they called me, I don't know if you follow boxing, but our coach is really funny. He started calling me Anthony Joshua, who is like the world heavyweight champion because he would like win fights with only his left hand. And I was just very honored, and I thought that was hilarious because I was pretty bad at boxing too. So it's like I was like a scrawny kid, who's like barely punching with her left hand, but my nickname was Anthony Joshua. So yeah.
You're much more courageous than I am. I would not ever think about picking up boxing.
Honestly,
in this day and age, yeah. I mean, I've had a couple friends that picked it up later in life, and they said it's a tremendous workout and all that. But yeah,
for sure. So. Yeah, I could never like punch someone else. Like even the coach, he would hold like a mat, and I'd just try, and I'd get too scared. She'd be like, "Just hit me!" Like I promise I've been hit way harder. Like she was like a professional, and something there is just harder for me. So I guess for me it was more like the technique, and then just learning the skill of, I guess, getting out of your comfort zone. But I did learn. I went to like a competition with their team. I obviously did not compete. I would have maybe gotten killed if I competed. I was pretty bad at keeping my hands up. But I think I used to think that boxing was like a very violent sport, which it still kind of is. But I saw that like after all the matches, the people who are competing, at least in a state like Iowa, at the competitions, like before then, they've been sparring with each other. Like people from different gyms get together, and then after every fight, they kind of hug it out. Like they're excited for each other because they're like partners at that point, and they've been pushing each other. So I think that's something that really switched my mindset on the sport.
So you actually got into it because you decided it was a journalistic sort of adventure that you would participate and write stories or articles about it? Or
yeah, I think I use journalism as an excuse quite frequently, but I was kind of like, I want to learn how to box. What if we made a video about boxing? And then I went to the I-Core boxing gym, who the coaches there are beautiful, wonderful people. And I was kind of talking to them about my idea, and I was like, I mean, if we could, I was thinking like a class or two, that they could teach us. And then the main coach, Cliff, he was just like, yeah, I mean, we could sponsor you for like 6 months if you want to come in. And I was like, I mean, okay. so
by sponsoring you, that means like you didn't have to.
No, didn't pay.
Normally, you'd have to pay for lessons or
exactly
time, right? Wow.
He just kind of let us come into the gym with everyone else, and have really treated us different. They're really, really good people. I love the gym there.
So you mentioned you're really interested in psychology. You may want to pursue that, but you really enjoy journalism.
Yeah.
Are you going to give that up, or you could combine it? Because I didn't think about it as a journalist. You can get a lot of freebies if you tell people, "Well, I'm going to write this ongoing story," just as you have done with the boxing.
That's true. I definitely take advantage. I currently, my plan is psychology with a minor in linguistics, but that will most likely change. I think there's a lot of stuff you can do with psychology. I think journalism too. Our journalism program has been super wonderful, and I think my plan is probably just to join whatever school I go to's publication, because I think a lot of journalism is real world experience and connection. So I guess in my eyes, and from some professionals who spoke at conferences I was at, you don't necessarily have to major in journalism. So some of them actually recommended just doing like something you're really passionate about and interested in, getting that like background knowledge. So you're sort of like an expert on a subject, and then still able to interview.
So do you know where you're going to further your education yet? Or are you still?
I haven't really heard back from everywhere yet, but I'm in at Iowa, and that seemed like a really solid option. So potentially we'll follow in your footsteps, but definitely not economics.
Right.
I will.
So what's the furthest school away from home you've applied to that you might consider very much if they allow you?
I recently got accepted into the University of Vermont, which
cool.
is very exciting because their campus is beautiful. A friend and I applied there because they're like, it's too pretty to not apply. So that's kind of our, like, I guess, safety school. Yeah, and we're like, if all else fails, we can go to Vermont and be roommates. So, yeah.
Yeah, Vermont's a
Parents
beautiful
don't like
state.
Vermont.
I've spent a little time up there because back in the day I did these different research projects, and they sent me up there a couple times. Actually, in the dead of winter, which was not the best. But Burlington's beautiful, and I forget where's the university located there.
I think it's
in
in Burlington.
It is.
Is it not?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, and it's a small state. But Burlington was great. I mean, I spent a couple of weeks there. It's a great place, and I understand it's a really good school too. So
yeah, I definitely do have that feeling of sort of wanting a change of pace. I think I keep on thinking like Iowa would be so cool if I hadn't grown up in Iowa City, but
that's how a lot of people think too. And now that we're near the end of this, what question didn't I ask you, or what would you like to share with all of us before we leave?
Oh, I don't know if I have something like that. Do you have something that you'd like to share? I'm really bad on the spot. I usually do the interviewing.
Well, I've really enjoyed it. This is my second one. I get to do one more. It's a great thing you're doing, Julie.